this is the book. It's called 21st Century Yoga. And I co-edited this with a woman named Carol Horton, who is in Chicago. And we know each other through the blogosphere, as we like to call it, basically through our writing and our thinking about yoga. So Carol had this idea, it was technically her idea, to take these conversations that were happening online and develop them into book form and essay form and stuff. So she contacted me, and I was like, let's do it, because I have this kind of editing and magazine publishing background and blogging background and stuff. So we met through my blog, It's All Yoga Baby, as well as her work on Elephant Journal. And we've been seeing these conversations happening, and we want to take them deeper and preserve them in book form. So we self-published this through Amazon's little book publishing wing, because we wanted to have kind of creative control, and we have this kind of like, do-it-yourself kind of background and experience. We wanted to take that and like put it into action by just literally doing it ourselves.
Very punk.
Yeah, it's very punk rock. And so we sort of we sort of made a list of people whose writing we've been reading and thinking we've been following and stuff, and among them was Jude Boccio, who's based in Tucson, Arizona. Michael Stone is another person. Matthew Remsky, he's a teacher in Toronto. So there's 10 contributors in here who are based all over North America. And their writing looks at the kind of socio-cultural aspects of yoga, how yoga intersects with social action, activism, politics, how people how we negotiate body image, and the commercialization of yoga, and how it's becoming sort of mass marketed and produced. So these are like kind of the themes running through it. And I'm just going to introduce Frank. So Frank and I are going to be doing a little discussion, and I have some questions prepared for him, so he's going to be put on the hot seat. So Frank is visiting Montreal from Tucson right now. He's here for the Moksha Yoga teacher training. So there's a little Moksha contingent, which is awesome. So we're just going to be, I've got some questions for him. He's going to talk about his essay. I'm going to read your bio, because it's so nicely articulates everything that you're about. So Frank Jude Boccio is a certified yoga teacher, interfaith minister, member of Thich Nhat Hanh's Order of Interbeing, and Zen Buddhist Dharma teacher, ordained by Korean Zen master Samu Sunim. His book Mindfulness Yoga is the first to apply the Buddha's mindfulness meditation teachings to yogasana practice. Besides his writing appearing in Tricycle, Shambhala Sun, Namaskar, and Yoga Journal, he maintains 2 blogs, Mindfulness Yoga and Zen Naturalism. Based in Tucson, where he lives with his wife, Monica, and their daughter, Giovanna, and their 2 cats and 2 chickens, he travels worldwide, leading workshops and retreats. So thank you so much for being here, Frank. It's really awesome and really great. And also, I just want to say, too, sort of in the spirit of the book, that this is like interactive, too. So if you have any questions, totally raise your hand. The intention of the book is to kind of start a conversation about yoga and to get people talking about yoga, because we do it, we're on the mat, whatever, we have these, maybe we have interpersonal conversations and stuff, but this is to kind of open it up, so you're totally welcome to jump in, and even if you disagree, especially if you disagree, we love disagreeing. So I'm just going to start with this, and then we can take it from there. And we're only take about 15-20 minutes, so it's not going to be like back-breaking amount of time to be sitting, so. Okay, so Frank, tell me about your piece in 21st Century Yoga.
Well, right into it, right?
Jump right into it.
My piece actually started as a blog piece in response to, in particular, a letter that was published in Huntington Post, I believe, about the equinox video that came out a year or so ago. And to me, the whole thing around that was epitomizing something that I've been seeing in the contemporary Hatha Yoga world. Yes?
Sorry, could you just summarize the equinox video?
Oh, it was a video with a scantily clad woman doing a very amazing physical practice, while apparently her fiance, but you don't know that in the video, they ended up getting married since then, is lying in a bed, and there's definitely some aspects that could be seen as sexualized, but you know, it's just that. She's in, I think, underwear.
And Equinox is a gym chain in the U.S.
It's a
US
chain. It's a big
gym chain.
Yeah. So, but that spurred me thinking about how, from my perspective, a kind of unthinking interpolation of this idea of the body beautiful into Hatha Yoga, and in a kind of unthinking way. Like, for instance, one of the things I was responding to was a comment where Catherine Budig, who's in the United States at least famous for posing naked in toe socks ads in Yoga Journal, and all she's wearing are these socks. And so she came to the defense of the video and talked about how the reason why she does these nude ads and why this ad was to inspire people. And she said, I wanted to show people what a body that does yoga can look like. And I was like, on so many levels, there are so many unquestioned assumptions in that statement that I just decided I wanted to unpack it. And the original title was actually, Is the Body Beautiful? Because I wanted to just kind of be very provocative. It's been toned down actually a little in the book.
Now it's called Questioning the Body Beautiful, Yoga, Commercialism, and Discernment. Yeah, so that's basically the essence of it. And you've touched on this a little bit, but why do you think the yoga body has become so representative of the practice?
Well, that's actually interesting because I think that ever since the origination of Hatha Yoga, there's always been this possibility of becoming fixated on the body. In the 14th century, there was a text called the Garada Samhita, and it said that when the postures of Hatha Yoga are practiced independent of Raja Yoga, which is meditation, and this is even more provocative than anything I would even write in my essay, but it says when that happens, when the asanas are practiced independent of meditation, the postures can become an obstacle to liberation. Right? And I mean, if you think about it, it's obvious, because then we become fixated on the body as self. We can fall into pride at all the things we can do, and as I wrote in the essay, and then when, because of either aging, accidents, illness, or death, you can't do it anymore, what happens, you know? And so I think that was, so it's not just a contemporary issue, right? I mean, if sages are warning about it 600, 700 years ago, but I think that in our culture, for a lot of reasons, you know, especially because when yoga was brought here, the postural practice became so centralized. I mean, let's face it, if you say you do yoga, people just think of the postures. Right? One of the things I kind of tongue-in-cheek, but also seriously, right, in the essay is I remember Yoga Journal once doing one of their polls, you know, that they always have at the front of the magazine saying, where's the strangest place you ever did yoga? And, you know, people were like, you know, in the back of a plane, in a bathroom, things like that. But it was like obvious they were talking about postures. And just to make a point about what yoga can be, I said that if I were to answer that, it would probably be changing my daughter's diaper in the vestibule of a Catholic church. Because that is my yoga. You know, to be really fully present while I'm doing the diaper changing. So, so that's... Yeah.
Any questions? I think one of the objectives of the book too. This is a theme throughout the book. I mean, there's lots of different themes, like not only around the body, but around disordered eating, yoga as a healing tool, how yoga can help with addiction and stuff. So the body is kind of the focus of like what Frank focused on in his piece. But also kind of what we're trying to do with the book and the conversations coming out of it is placing yoga in this kind of contemporary, beginning of the 21st century context. So how would you describe the social context of the body right now?
This is something that we talked about just yesterday when we were talking about in the Buddhist tradition, the first foundation or the first presencing of mindfulness, or satipatthana, is the body. And one of the, in a very interesting kind of paradox, and those of us who are yoga teachers, I think, would get this immediately. Many times when students first come to yoga practice, asana practice, I used to joke that people seem to be living from their neck up, or sometimes, like James Joyce talks about one of his characters in The Dubliners, he lives a short distance from his body. Now I think most people who come to, who don't have a deep embodiment practice already, live from their eyebrows up. It's just, with that kind of cerebral kind of way. And so I think that there's that dichotomy. I mean, we kind of fetishize the body. We use it, we use a specific kind of body, which is also being used in yoga to sell yoga. Generally, a white, thin, attractive woman. You don't see generally people like me in those ads. You don't see people that look like George Costanza from Seinfeld in those ads. And that's what I was really questioning a lot in this essay, because when someone says, like, I wanted to show what a body can look like while doing yoga, it's like, well, my body will never look like Catherine Budig's. And it's been shown, actually, that if someone is not anything like that, that it's just as liable to turn them away and off from the yoga practice. So the intention may have been very nice, the intention to inspire, but in the Buddhist yoga tradition, right intention comes after right understanding. And so part of the point I was trying to make is I think that there was an example of avidya, right? We all know avidya, ignorance, meaning kind of at least a partial understanding, if not a complete understanding of it. So I just wanted to, again, through the essay, open up the question about the body and what's even being referred to. As I talked to the group yesterday, 90% of the DNA in your physical body is non-human. The volume of your body is mostly microorganisms that are living in and on it, but if those microorganisms were not there, you couldn't live. So the real boundary, like, what's your body then, if you can't live with these so-called alien organisms? Right? So I just, these are the kind of things that are really completely overlooked or elided when we just say something flippant like, the body is beautiful. I'm not saying it isn't, but don't bathe for 6 months and tell me how beautiful you think the body is. Where is the beauty really? Is it in the body? And that fixation is what I see happening all too often.
So also in your essay, Frank, you read about how yoga has become co-opted by mainstream culture, and it's lost its radical countercultural potential. So what is this potential?
Yeah, I say that as someone who was in the front row of CBGB's in 1977, 78. I'm old enough to have been at the tail end of the hippie thing, and so I was protesting the Vietnam War and all that, but I was right there in the middle of the whole punk scene. And I believe that when I talk about yoga, again, I'm talking about a very integrated yoga. The core of it is mindfulness. I mean, my book is called Mindfulness Yoga. As such, that is the most countercultural thing I've ever been involved in. Brad Werner, another ex-punk rock Zen teacher, wrote a book called Hardcore Zen. And he said, that like in the punk movement, we were basically saying we got to question everything. But really what the punks kind of didn't question was themselves. And so like Brad Werner is saying, in Zen, when we say question everything, we mean including and maybe even most importantly ourselves. And so in that sense, I think it's really a very countercultural practice, and one that our culture is really trying to, and I'm not saying even as a conscious thing, it's a structure that's created to keep us oblivious. I mean, what does Buddha mean? Awakened person, right? That's all it is. It's not a name. And you go into a pharmacy and you've got 32 different brands of toothpaste, pretty much all the same ingredients. Think of all the energy that goes into, I mean, neuroscience has shown that if you have more than 3 or 4 things to choose from, the psychic energy, the neural energy that goes into trying to make a choice, depletes you from making the next choice. And we're confronted with that kind of thing constantly, and we think it's like great freedom because we've got 62 different forms to choose from, but it's actually a really great way to keep people asleep.
It's interesting that you talk about the punk movement not necessarily questioning itself, because I think that that's part of the intention with the conversation that we're trying to start with this book. I know I can speak for myself in my own work, that my work is to question yoga and to give people a space to question it, whether it's the emphasis on the body, or how it's being commercialized, or how it's being co-opted, or how it's being packaged and sold, how people are articulating it. So it's one of the intentions is to stimulate discussion and conversation and encourage questioning, and a place where people can ask our honest, hard questions that maybe don't have answers. So what do you think about the current level of discourse within the yoga community?
One of my teachers who recently passed away, Georg Feuerstein, so maybe some of you have heard of him. I guess it was about 8 or 9 years ago, was asked in an interview, what do you think about, something similar, what do you think about the state? And without missing a beat, he's like, it's a mess. And I don't think it's gotten all that much better, but one of the reasons why I was delighted and honored to be invited to be part of this is that I see this book as at least a first step. Because in the Buddhist tradition, this internal questioning of Buddhism has been going on for at least the last 15 years. There's even a blog called Speculative Non-Buddhism, which is so open-ended and critical, and it's really amazing. And it is actually started by this guy Glenn Wallace, who was yet and again a punk rocker in the 70s, and there's so much energy on this stuff and all that. And in yoga, most of the discourse is, oh, we're all one and everything's really nice. Right? Oh, I don't want to think about that, And so, yeah, I just see this being as a little bit of a shake-up.
How do you define the yoga community in general? Because I think that the main objective of yoga or of society is to become more aware. And I think that with time, we see a wide or broader degree of awareness among all types of people. And now it's becoming mainstream, but is that not good in a certain way? Because these people are realizing that, being aware is important.
Yeah, the question of the mainstreaming is really one of those that I think is really, it's a really great place, for all the reasons of its ambivalence even, I see this happening, for instance, in my field in particular with mindfulness. Every week, 3 or 4 new papers are passing through my office of scientists and, people who are doing studies on mindfulness. And when I was in college, giving my age away a bit, we were taught that by the time you're 9 years old, your brain is fully formed and it's downhill from then. Right? And then in the 80s, they started coming up with this concept of neuroplasticity. Most of you heard of that, right? But what they meant for many years was just the simple act of as the cliche goes, when the neurons fire together, they wire together, So it's a change in the function. And it's relatively recent, maybe in the last 5 or 6 years, that they found that through mindfulness practice, the structure actually changes. So people who practice mindfulness meditation develop greater gray matter in the prefrontal cortex, and the amygdala shrinks and things like that. So they're doing all this study, but what I'm worried about is that as mindfulness gets mainstreamed, what's getting downplayed is the ethical foundations, which are the core of the Buddhist tradition. Because within Western science and psychology, it's all this, being ethically neutral. So many of you, if you've ever heard mindfulness defined, you usually probably hear it as it's a non-reactive, non-judgmental, pure, awareness, present moment awareness. That's how John Kabat-Zinn, for instance, famously defined it. But that's not how the Buddhist tradition defines it. The Buddhist sati, which is the word that we mindfulness, is related to the word for remembering. And so, yes, it's important to be in the moment, but the moment doesn't exist isolated from the past. It's the sum total of the past. It will also condition the future. So mindfulness is part of it, at least, is remembering that when I said that, my wife got upset, so I'm going to remember not to say it in the future, There's that, and that's what's getting lost. And so mindfulness is being shrunken to this present-minded attention, which, if you think about it, an assassin needs, right? So it's ethically neutral. And the term used for that kind of attention is manasikara, which is a completely different term. Sati is this ethical. And the same thing with yoga in some ways is, when it's great that it's getting mainstreamed, but how many of the 30 million or so, supposedly, who are practicing it, really understand the fuller context? Kripalu, many people here familiar with Kripalu? It's the largest yoga institute in North America. I think something like, it's probably even more now, but the last I had heard, 80,000 people go through this place a year, right? And at the beginning of the decade, no, actually it was the end of last decade, in the 90s, for 3 years in a row they did this conference called East Meets East. And it was like yogis and Buddhists getting together, and they were going to try and learn from each other about their traditions, what did they share, what was different. And I asked one of the directors there, why did they stop that? And it was like, because the Buddhists came all ready to debate and learn everything else, and the yogis didn't know their own philosophy. They couldn't discuss Patanjali. So the Buddhists had to tell them about Patanjali before they could ever get to a debate, but then the weekend was over, So, and sadly, that hasn't changed all that much,